Okay, Thursday night football, Cowboys, Seattle. We will dive into that game as well as something Mike Tomlin said. And are these owners, because they're so rich, becoming too quick to fire head coaches? As well as Deion Sanders, 4-8 season. Some thoughts on an article I read regarding all the Pac-12 coaches that played him anonymously, gave some thoughts on the program. And you guys know the drill. Subscribe to the page. We just started this page a couple weeks ago for all of our content from the 3 and Out podcast. So go subscribe to that as well. The audio version, Apple, Spotify, wherever you want to go to listen, we have you covered. As you can see, I'm rocking this 3 and Out hat. Thevolume.com. Thevolume.com has merch. So go check that out. And before we dive into the Cowboys and some Mike Tomlin talk, here's what I got for you. I got a little app. It happens to be called Game Time, the official ticketing app of this podcast. It's the holiday seasons. You're giving out presents. You're doing nice things for people. You want to get out of the house, go enjoy yourself. Well, I have you covered. When you download the Game Time app, you can go to any event, football, basketball, hockey, concerts, comedy shows. And when you buy a pair of tickets and use the promo code JOHN, 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 you get $20 off. It's hard to save money in these inflationary times. We're all getting raked over the coals. But when you get a promo code like this to do something fun, you can't beat it. Cannot recommend it enough. Download the Game Time app, official ticketing app of this podcast, and promo code John. Save yourself $20. You know what's crazy is I was looking at the standings today, and I just went to the league standings, and then I filtered by point differential, which, listen, I would say historically, the bigger your point differential, the more dominant of a team you are. And do you know who happened to be the number one team in point differential? With almost 100 points separating them from the 10-1 Philadelphia Eagles? A team that lost to the Philadelphia Eagles. A team that goes by the Dallas Cowboys. They have the best point differential in the National Football League. And whenever I get asked, how good is Dallas? How far can they go? Hell, I picked them to win the division. I think they're pretty good. But they've had 2 massive games. You're allowed to blow a game to a random team, and they did it early in the season. But they got 2 swings, 2 bites at the apple against the 49ers on Sunday Night Football and against the Philadelphia Eagles in front of 30-plus million people. And they lost them both. One game, they got their ass kicked. The other game, they're winning by 10 points at halftime, and then they find themselves down. They end up losing the game. And there were plays to be had to win them the game, right? We all watched it. But I do think there's a lot on the line for the Cowboys. One, going into Seattle, let's face it, to me, Seattle's not that good. And a huge reason, I talked about it with Colin the other day, is Geno Smith. He's solid. He's easy to root for. Seems like a great guy. If he's your starting quarterback for several years, he limits your ceiling. And I think we're kind of seeing that this year. Their ceiling is limited. Now, they've had offensive line issues. They don't have a great pass rush. But ultimately, if you put a really good quarterback on that team, it's 11-12 win team. With Geno, I think at best they're winning 9 games this year. And there's a reason the Cowboys are favored by almost 10 points. And this is not some random Thursday night game. Both these 2 teams played on Thursday. So this is basically a normal week for both teams. And the NFL now has been doing this for a while. They take 2 teams from the Thanksgiving Thursday games, which now has become the Cowboys against someone else. And that's your primetime game the week after Thanksgiving. And on paper coming into the season, this game looked pretty good. Still doesn't look bad now. I think the shitty part, if you're a fan of football in the state of Washington, right, especially in Seattle, and you root for the Huskies and you root for Seattle, a couple weeks ago, you were feeling pretty good. And now you go in 2 of the biggest games of the year, obviously for the Washington Huskies and the Seattle Seahawks, and you're a combined almost 20-point underdog. Like, what the hell is going on here? But there's a reason. The Cowboys have taken advantage of every team beside the Arizona Cardinals, who's not very good. And they don't just beat you. They beat the shit out of you. And let's face it, the Eagles, who have just had an incredible season of finding ways to win games. I mean, last week is an all-timer, but you got to give them credit. And I've seen some people compare them like to last year's Minnesota team. Not talent-wise, but just it eventually catches up to you. I don't know if it does when you have this talent. But I think an individual game can catch up to you. And when you look at the Eagles, like they're going to run out of gas here. And to me, if they got beat by the 49ers by 10 plus points, I don't think that would be surprising. Not because fully rested, normal schedules, both teams, to me, it's a coin flip game. But given the situation that played on Monday night, knockdown, drag out on the road, fly home, get home really late, have a short week, you play the Bills, you go into overtime, you play a 70-minute game where a lot of your defenders play, 80 to 90 snaps, it's understandable. But if they lose to the Eagles and the Cowboys take care of business, like, it's fucking wide open for them. They play Philadelphia next week in Dallas. All of a sudden, you'd be 9-3, they'd be 10-2, and you would have a chance, if you beat them, to have the same exact record. So while it looked pretty dire, that devastating loss to the Eagles, which we all said, the crazy thing is, Dak was arguably one of the best, if not the best player on the field. They played their best game in years, and they lost. Like, there are no moral victories when you're a team that's trying to win the Super Bowl. But looking back, if you win this game, you're going to feel pretty good about your chances, specifically against the Eagles, come to the playoffs. So tomorrow's a good example. And if you're listening to this on Thursday morning, like, I fully expect Dallas to boat race these guys. And I think Seattle is just kind of running out of juice, and kind of that Geno juice that has not been great down the stretch last year. You watch them this year. Now they've battled some injuries, but they are a team, and Colin and I that needs a quarterback. So whether that's trading up in the draft, there aren't really options in free agency. You've obviously paid Geno Smith, so it's impossible really to upgrade there. But to me, they're a team that looks to get a young guy this offseason. But this is a good game on paper that I expect. To me, it's like Dallas 38, Seattle 17. Like, I fully expect it to be an ass kicking. And all of a sudden you start looking at Seattle, you're like, they're going to have issues, because they do. I saw Mike Tomlin call T.J. Watt the best defensive player in the NFL. And I said a couple weeks ago, I thought that Myles Garrett, I would vote for him to be the MVP. Now he's injured. We'll see, if this derails his season a little bit. Listen, these awards are fluid. You can be the lead horse in the race and get passed. Like, it's not over till the fucking season ends. I love seeing this. Well, you just said a couple weeks ago, yeah, things change. You said this team was good. Yeah, then they lost 3 games in a row. So my opinion changes on them. Like, everything is very fluid in sports. I never understand. But you said a month ago, well, yeah, he's playing well. And now he's playing bad. Like Baker Mayfield through the first couple weeks of the season. Look good. Now you watch him. Doesn't look good. So it's like your opinion changes as you watch them. It's like part of evaluating players when you watch them on television, right? There are only so many guys like TJ Watt, Steph Curry, Patrick Mahomes, whoever, that usually play well every single week. Most guys are kind of up and down. So it ebbs and flows. It's the way sports work. Now, TJ Watt, one of the rare guys who was just incredible. And I was really thinking, what could the Watt father, in horse racing, when a guy wins, not a guy, but the horse wins the Kentucky Derby, the Belmont, whatever, one of those big races, if you were ever to win the Triple Crown, the value is not in winning those races. Obviously, you make money if you own the horse when they win the races, but it's in the value of the horse's sperm to be able to create more horses like that given horse. It's why that it's so valuable to own a championship level horse. What could like the Bosa father or the Watt father, like their ability? J.J. Watt is a first ballot Hall of Famer. He is one of the best players I've ever seen live and one of the best NFL players of my lifetime. Like, in his peak, it doesn't get much better than that. So to have one of those guys is an incredible accomplishment as a parent. To have 2 of those guys, like TJ Watt is trending to be a Hall of Famer as well. To have 2 Hall of Fame sons at defensive end, that's fucking nuts. Bosa, same thing. Now, Joey, because he's injured all the time, his career is not going to stack up to it. But we all have to agree, like, Joey Bosa, when healthy, legit top 5 pick, and obviously Nick, former defensive player of the year, freaking incredible. Even like think about Archie Manning, who produced Peyton and Eli. Peyton, one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. I mean, Eli had 2 incredible playoff runs, but on the whole, like, he's not hell, we're debating him, like, should he actually be in the Hall of Fame just because he won the 2 championships? I think Eli's pretty good, but I also understand the other side because I have been at games when Eli has not played well, and it can look really ugly. But imagine being a father and having 2 sons. Like, I don't even have children yet. I would imagine most people listening to this that have young children, just kind of keep their fingers crossed. Like, I hope my son does well in life, like treats people well, successful guy, has his head on straight, works hard, and can create a good life for his future family and, do good by my name, right? I would love if that guy becomes like maybe an entrepreneur or a business owner and becomes really successful and impacts the world in a positive way. Hell, I mean, ideally, he'd become like some all-time great in his field. Like that's, I would say, very, very slim. Producing multiple all-pro defensive linemen. Pretty nuts. And we've had some pretty good ones. I mean, the Diggs brothers, Stephon is obviously a really good player for the Bills. And Trayvon with the Cowboys, I mean, is just an incredible playmaker. Obviously, the Bosa brothers, Travis and Jason Kelce. Like, what a job by the Kelce father to produce those two guys, two Hall-of-Famers, center and, a lot of times the same position, which makes sense, right? You idolize your brother, you just copy them. Think about Jason. I mean, he's a center. His brother is like one of the great athletic tight ends of all time. Now, granted, Jason is an athletic center, but still, I'm fascinated by, genetics and the ability to create, just incredible human beings, because it's not like LeBron James. Bronny James, who I'm glad to see he's doing well after the scare when he was practicing. But Bronny James, like a short, might not even start as, even if he was fully healthy for USC. And that's LeBron James, Michael Jordan. I mean, think of we just hope Charlie Woods can like play Division I golf. Random guys just producing TJ and JJ. Incredible. But here's the one thing about the Steelers. Looking at their schedule, because I've talked a lot of shit about them, because I picked them to win the AFC. Not to win the AFC, but to win the division, win the AFC North, and be right there like as an AFC championship level team. I might not have been crazy. Now, I did not think it was going to look like this. I thought they were going to be much more potent on offense. I expected them, to be an explosive unit, right? And I was wrong. They have, I think last week's kind of embarrassing, celebrating 422 yards when you scored 16 points. Like, you don't get to celebrate moving the ball when you have 16 points. It would have been cool if you would have scored 27 points and had the same excitement, but I don't think you're allowed to do that when you score 16 points. But here's our schedule coming up. They play the Cardinals this week. Then they play the Patriots, who I don't know if you've noticed, awful. Cardinals are better than the Patriots because Kyler Murray is, a scary player. Then they play the Colts, which, incredible story so far. I do think it's going to come to a screeching halt. And then Cincinnati with Jake Browning. There is a chance that in about a month, you look up, and this Pittsburgh Steelers, who struggles to score 20 points, is going to be 11-4. There was a moment against the Cincinnati Bengals when Jake Browning, the starting quarterback, and they had the lead. I think, at one point in time, I think it was 7-0 or 6-0. And I'm thinking, could Mike Tomlin get fired? And then all of a sudden, you kind of look at the schedule, they find a way to win that game. Could they be 11-4? Like, ultimately, the Eagles have won good, weird games. Could they be 8-3? Could they be 10-1? We can argue till we're blue in the face. They get a little lucky here. They make some crazy plays here. They're a really good team. Like, they have an MVP level quarterback. They have really good players. Even their defense has some holes. It's like, they're secondary. They still have James Bradbury and Darius Slay, like two corners that are starting on the majority of teams. They trade for Byard, who, listen, a little long in the tooth, but he's a legitimate starter. So yeah, they got some question marks at linebacker, but like that's a real NFC championship level team, even if they didn't get some of their breaks. We all acknowledge that. The Steelers, you watch them the majority of the season, you're like, what the fuck is going on? How is this happening? And then all of a sudden you look, I think worst case scenario, they're 10-5. I mean, unless they have some crazy injury. If I would have told you 3 or 4 weeks ago that the Steelers are going to be 10-5, you'd have been like, you're crazy. That's not that level team. And they just found a way. So this is where, now, if you're one and done in the playoffs as a 12-5 team, people are going to be critical of Mike. But this is how Mike fights off the criticism. Because you watch all these guys, like everyone loves Frank Reich, who I saw Florio wrote an article that David Tepper can't say his name. And in my defense, if I pay you $40 million and you get the number 1 overall draft pick and you go 1-10 and your offense is one of the worst offenses we've ever seen, do I have to say your name right? Like, I'm paying you a premium. I'm literally paying you to go away. I made you a head coach when, let's face it, no one else is making you a head coach. And your name's kind of hard to say. Like for a long time, I said Frank Reich. And then a bunch of people were like, it's Reich. Okay, I get it. But I kind of on Tepper's side. Sometimes names, remember when, what's his name with the Washington football team, Commanders, Redskins, used to call him Kirk Cousins? And it was like, bro, it's Kirk Cousins. And he couldn't say like that. It's like, come on, this is your starting quarterback who's actually a pretty good player. Say his name right. This one, it's kind of confusing. Sometimes there's silent letters and different pronunciations. I always thought it was a little weird. Now, I've been saying it right for a long time. No different than Eberflus. I used to call him Uberflus. And my whole take was, until he becomes a credible head coach, do I have to say his name right? Like if you're saying Andy Reid, now Belichick, I mean, some of these names, if you're screwing up, like that's kind of on you. Do you have to earn some respect to get your name said right? People still, my girlfriend's mother, who have been dating her now well over a year, just sent us a card for Thanksgiving and only put one F. And in fairness to Jennifer Moore, that she's not the first person to do that. People have been doing that to me for, I would say, the majority of my life. When I worked with Fresno State, I had a name tag, one F. When I got hired with the Eagles, one F. When I got hired in radio, one F. I just take it. My name's hard to spell, a lot of letters. It's not, Johnson, but it is what it is. The Steelers are coming. And on David Tepper, because I've seen a lot of people freak out about these owners, like firing people. Like, what a waste of money. How could they, especially in college, like how could they just blow all this cash? Because they got a lot of cash, right? I mean, people freak out about money that don't have money, right? But no different, like they treat $1 million like you treat $7. Money is all relative. And when you have a lot coming in, giving a lot out the door doesn't feel as big when you don't have a lot coming in. The reason a lot of coaches and players back in the day didn't get fired as quickly or cut as quickly because there wasn't as much money. Well, in this day and age, when you get close to $400 from the media rights deals, I say this all the time. The best part about the NFL, different than the NBA, like my take is I saw Colin thinks Mark Cuban's going to run for president. I think he's getting out not because he's running for president. I think he knows the NBA's peaked. How are they ever going to get a television deal? Honestly, their next television deal could be worse than the current one. Their expenses have only gone up. They're paying the players more now than ever. So if you get less money coming in and more going out, you got problems. Business 101. Well, what does the NFL have? Their salary cap is capped, right, at about half the money that's just guaranteed from television. Well, even if you are a winless team, you're still going to make money in ticket sales, suites, merchandise. It's going to be impossible not to make a ton of net profit. And then you factor in a guy like David Tepper is rich as hell. So it's like he's got his own independent money. This team that he now owns, which he paid a boatload for, is generating a ton of cash flow coming in. If he screws up, which I was thinking about this, I think the old adage is take a while, really vet when you hire and fire quickly, right? Take your time hiring, but once get rid of that person. And I think that works whether you're running a deli, whether you're running a podcast operation, or whether you're running an NFL team. Now, did he vet Frank Reich properly? Should he have hired him in the first place? We definitely can argue that. Would he like a redo on that one? Of course. I think that's pretty clear. Rumors and everyone said that he wanted to hire the guy from the Lions. Well, guess what? That guy wouldn't take the job. I've heard from some people in the NFL, it wasn't even that he was scared off by Tepper. He just didn't feel ready and didn't feel comfortable in that situation with a new owner. And whatever the variables are, I think Johnson and the Lions feels pretty good about that decision. Because one thing with Tepper is he has a quick trigger when he doesn't respect you. But here's what I will say if I'm sitting in David Tepper's shoes, right? If I don't think you know what you're doing, and listen, if you watch the Panthers, how could you feel confident this guy knows what he's doing? He fired himself from being the play caller. Then he named himself the play caller. Then he fired himself being the play caller. And maybe Frank was over it. Like, I've been in a job when I was in radio. I hated it. I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I hate working with the guy I was working for. And I was like, this is not fun. I don't want to do this job anymore. We were miserable, right? But it's like, I'm not going to fire myself. I want the money going out. I hated it, right? And I think a lot of people get like that in jobs. And I think Frank was a good example of someone that was miserable doing the job. Now that's on Tepper. hiring a guy who probably just couldn't turn down the money. I think I saw a headline that this will probably be his last job and he'll retire and basically go off to the sunset. But I do not blame Dave Tepper for firing. Just like I don't blame Mark Davis. Whenever I see these people like, these owners are getting too quick. Well, Josh McDaniels is fucking terrible. Was he supposed to just let Josh McDaniels coach for a couple more years and keep losing a bunch of games and everyone hate him? Right? I understand there are some difficult decisions. When the 49ers mutually departed with Harbaugh, that was an embarrassment. When Dean Spanos and the Chargers chose A.J. Smith over Marty Schottenheimer, that was clearly the wrong decision. When the Washington Redskins at the time didn't realize that they had Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan, LaFleur, and all these guys, like, you should probably not hate these guys, but build around them. That's on them. But when you're in a situation where the guy's the head coach and he is torpedoing your franchise to embarrassing levels and your team sucks, and then you don't feel he knows what he's doing, she'd be like, well, just be patient. Part of the reason the Rooneys are patient with Mike Tomlin, he wins. Andy Reid got a long time in Philly. Well, yeah, he was going to NFC championship games. He was winning double-digit games. They were printing cash for their owner on top of the media deal. They were constantly in the mix. So it's like, I never have a problem with an owner being impatient when I don't think the guy's any good. And literally his record is not good. And it's easy to think the interim coach, right, like Rich Bisaccia with the Raiders a couple years ago, Steve Wilkes last year, that's a risky move too. Like, you're usually not going to find the next Belichick or Andy that way. Now, maybe you can, but I never fault the team for not going that way either. This is hard. Hiring people, just like drafting people, is very, very difficult. And when you make a bad decision, luckily as a fan, like ultimately if you're a Panther fan, this guy's nuts. Like he's a maniac. What I don't like reading is him telling play callers what plays to run Monday through Friday, him telling you who to draft. Like that is a major problem. If that's the case, which everyone seems to feel like it is, that's fucked. You got issues. But you can't blame him for getting rid of Frank. Just like you can't blame him for getting rid of Matt Rule. You need to upgrade as coach. Now, I had some people in the NFL, like the only way he's going to get his pick of the litter, he's going to have to overpay by such a high amount. Well, he's got the money, right? Steve Ballmer can be nuts. He can cut checks other people can't. Mark Cuban was nuts for a long time. Can cut checks that other people can't. Joe Lacob is crazy. Has a big checkbook. George Steinbrenner. I mean, look around sports. When I have a bigger bank than you, I can be a little crazy and still make up for it. So to me, what you can't do, like, here's the one thing about the Cowboys. Jerry's been the general manager for a while, right? And his son plays a big role as well with the scouting staff. Kind of feels like they know what they're doing, doesn't it? Like, Jerry, say what you want about Jerry. Big ego, likes being in the forefront, likes being a star. He likes being no different than the coach or the star quarterback. But they kind of know what they're doing when they're picking players. That's not even debatable anymore. The problem for a lot of these owners, Jimmy Haslam's currently getting sued by Warren Buffett. That guy, someone hit me like, well, you said pushing the envelope is a good thing. Agreed. But Jimmy Haslam is always in the stuff. Always causing problems. Screwing the truckers, pissing off Warren Buffett. All for doing what you got to do to make a little extra coin. This one, I don't know. Something's a little off about him. But some of these owners, man, there is no point in high. It's one thing if I'm David Tepper and I have a hedge fund, right? And I hire 3 guys, or I'm Steve Cohen, the guy who owns the Mets, to run my money, to give them advice, or to tell them, hey, buy more of this, because that's what I do. That's the craft that I created myself, right? If you hit me up, like, ask me for some advice podcasting or how to become a scout or recruiter in college, like, I give you some advice. If you ask me for advice, like, how do you get into, Wells Fargo banking or Chase banking? I wouldn't know what to tell you, right? So these guys getting the football, just because you're a football fan, doesn't mean you know what you're talking about in terms of who to pick, who not to pick, who to hire, who not to hire. Doesn't mean you can't have opinions. When these guys become the owner and he's paid so much money, clearly he's just telling them what to do. And that's been the bigger disaster. But even if you told Frank what to do correctly, it might not have mattered because he clearly doesn't look good enough. And, massaging the egos of coaches. Like, for example, I saw Florio. I don't know if he put it on Instagram or he said it on maybe one of his television show things, YouTube. I don't know where I saw it. But he said, I think we're all looking at Mike Vrabel's situation wrong. Everyone thinks that the Titans might break up with Mike Vrabel. He's like, I think it's more he might want to break up with them. And, he's got some ideas. Maybe he's, the owner, the resources, whatever. I don't know the details, but I was like, yeah, that's very plausible. But if you want to get a guy, let's just say Mike Vrabel was available, or Sean McVay goes to Amazon in like 3 years, he's available. You want to have those guys. The way to keep them happy is go, listen, Sean, I'm here to do Mike, I'm here to do one thing and one thing only for you. This is what Robert Kraft did for 20 years with Bill. Hell, he's still doing it with Bill. You win games. You win games. Playoff games. You make us really important in this league. I'll sign my name on any check you need. Trades, signings, draft picks, whatever you want to do, you got to thumb those up for me. You do not need to ask me ever for a player transaction. Unless there's character involved, then run it by me. But in terms of trading players, trading draft picks, that is what coaching the team during the season, you do that. I am here to support you financially, to wear a good-looking suit on Sunday and have my mistress. She's not my mistress anymore. She's now my girlfriend because I've divorced my wife right next to my side. And we're going to root you on with some of our famous friends. You win us fucking games. You make us money. I'll keep paying you money. Do whatever you want. Treat this team as your baby, as you own it. And Belichick, brought a lot to the table with Kraft, right? Because he won a lot. And Kraft never overstepped his boundaries. He let Tom Brady walk. Now, that's ultimately probably the wrong decision. Should have got involved there. But in fairness to Roberts, like everything I've ever let Bill do, he's been right about. So now, are you going to get Bill Belichick? Probably not. But if you just get a solid coach, hell, if you just get, one thing the Rams did, what the 49ers did, what even with LaFleur and the Packers, empower the guy. You have to empower the guy. If you're holding his hand like Steve Cohen would or like you would on the trading floor, it's not going to work. This is not, you have no expertise. You know nothing about any of this when it comes to actual football. Now, about like signs in the building, hiring cafeteria assistants. I'm not saying you can't have input on things inside the building of your football team. But when it comes to the football players and the coaching staff and the acquisitions in March around free agency and the draft, you have to let those guys cook. Because if you don't let them cook, you can't complain about the fucking meal. And David Tepper's up there screaming the F word, going up and down. It's like, bro, you keep getting it. This is partly you. And one article I read today from Albert Breer is like, he kind of shows up periodically. And he's got ideas and then he disappears. Like the football players and the coaches, they're there all day, every day, during the season. So you come in and out. That's not the way the world works. You can operate other businesses like that. You cannot operate this business like that. So I think these new big time owners, it's going to be difficult for them. Can you believe we're this deep into the NFL season? We got to make every second count. With DraftKings Sportsbook, you can make the most out of every game. Bet on your favorite teams for a shot at winning big bucks. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting $5 on any matchup. So right now, get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the app now and use the code JOHN. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on the NFL. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code JOHN. The crown is yours. Deion Sanders. I have no problem with any coach or player talking shit. I mean, that's if you want to talk shit, ultimately you got to play or coach against the other team. And Deion has been one of the loudest individuals of my lifetime as an athlete. Always backed it up. Easily one of the greatest football players of all time and probably a top 2 or 3 athlete. I mean, definitely of my life, you could argue ever. It's harder as a coach when you're talking a big game and you don't get to play. And it's one thing to do it at Alabama or Georgia when you have a stack, Ohio State, Michigan. His team's not very good. They went 4-8, and I watched them a lot the second half of the year. They were fucking terrible. And their offensive and defensive lines look awful. There was an article on The Athletic by Bruce Feldman and several other people. And they basically interviewed all these assistant coaches, a lot of coordinators in the Pac-12. And they all just gave their opinions. And one main opinion that I read that was just a good quote, like, it was all hugs and kisses in the beginning, in the offseason, and then early on when they won a couple games. Get ready for the horror stories to come out. Now, one thing I was told by a scout a while back is he had heard that when you work for the program, when you work for Deion, you sign an NDA. Now, maybe part of that is like because everything's being filmed. I don't know. That's just what I heard. I don't know that. But ultimately, if I sign an NDA and I go somewhere else and I tell, one of the reporters for The Athletic or whoever, how are you going to prove that I said it? One thing I think is clear. And listen, I respect Deion for saying we're not going to be an ATM machine. And I think he was talking about recruits. I would never pay high school recruits big money. I think that's stupid. I would pay transfer portal guys money. But the one thing Deion, next year, the Pac-12 was good this year. And their team was awful on the line of scrimmage. So they got fucking worked. They got embarrassed. I mean, Washington State, who's not that great, beat them like 56-14. That was their second to last game. They got mollywopped. They got embarrassed. And they ended Shador's season. You got to get better at the line of scrimmage. And that's, to me, a question, big picture about Deion Sanders, who, let's face it, we all thought, could Deion Sanders go to be the NFL coach? Could he coach like Florida or Texas A&M, or could he get some enormous job? I think he's a long way away from that, because ultimately, for as much as like the recruiting, a lot of those big schools kind of recruit themselves. And Deion's recruiting class right now is not great. And he hasn't proven that he can win, right? And he's got to prove to me next year for him to be like kind of validate everything. I think you got to win 7-8 games. And you look at the Big 12, it's going to be awful. It's not very good. Period, point blank, end of story, right? I mean, honestly, two of the best teams are going to be like Arizona and Utah, like Kansas State. I mean, Texas, Oklahoma are gone. UCF, Cincinnati. I don't think they're a lock unless Shador gets dramatically better. Now, it's not all his fault. One of the coordinators in this article said when we played Shador, he got massacred. And you watch some games a lot like Caleb running for his life. But as well as he played in that TCU game, in that Colorado State game down the stretch, you watched him, maybe he's getting a little gunshot. He did not look as good. Now he's young, he's raw, for big jump in competition, but there's going to be a lot of pressure on him. And I also think that Deion Sanders is an outlier. He could play both ways and be kind of unfazed. I think Travis Hunter needs to kind of pick a position. And to me, it's on Deion, not on him. Of course, Travis Hunter's going to want to play both ways. Kind of go all in. If he can be a top 20 corner, like a top 20 pick as a corner, become a corner, and then play periodically on offense. If you're a top 15, 20 pick at wide receiver, do that and then play periodically on defense. But to go both ways, 100, 120 snaps, it's not realistic. And you're going to get diminishing returns against better teams with your best player. So I think one big offseason, no one at Alabama, Georgia, even like the Oregon States, Washington States, like the mid-tier Power 5, ever has a guy go both ways. It's not possible. It's too hard. And in fairness to Deion, he's like, fuck, I did it. Kind of. I mean, Deion obviously, didn't play full-time wide receiver, but what they ask him to do, I haven't watched college football 30 years. It's very, very difficult. It really, Charles Woodson had some moments on offense and obviously would return, but to ask a guy to go both ways, there were times when he just wore down. And there was a play, that Stanford game they lost, where the dude mossed it over his head on Friday night. He had to be just gassed. So I think there's pressure on Deion. And listen, in fairness to Deion, a lot of people are pussies in life, and they're scared to put the spotlight on him because they don't want the heat. Deion's not scared of that. And he put the spotlight on him, and he got humbled a little bit. The whole program did. And, you hire this guy from Kent State. He's the head coach. He leaves to become the offensive coordinator, and you demote him for Pat Shurmur? You demote him for Pat Shurmur? Can't do that. As one quote in the article regarding that, that's an embarrassment. And I completely agree. That guy's now the head coach at San Diego State. Like, if you had demoted him for, like, I don't know, Sean McVay or something, okay. Pat Shurmur? Are we serious? I do wonder, like, part of being a head coach, we've given Sean Payton a lot of credit on this one. is like you got to be able to handle the rough seas and just kind of make it through without craziness. And Deion, they hit some bumps in the road and it got ugly quick. One thing I wanted to do is a little segment called Can't Be Serious. I just chose some headlines, and my first reaction to those headlines was like, this can't be serious. I mean, I read this earlier today, and I was like, this can't be serious. Are you kidding me? Is this a joke? And when I saw a headline of Caleb Williams will be a game time decision whether he's going to the NFL. Now, I'm all for, like, listen, I negotiate my contracts. I understand there is a level of when you're negotiating against two people, you're not negotiating against the NFL because of the number one pick, your contract is set, but you're probably trying to get like, hey, could USC get you $20 million for a season? And maybe he's waiting on that. So I understand throwing it out there, but this can't be serious. Like, bro, the NFL pays you $40 million the moment you go to the league. Plus, your clock starts toward, your second contract. Here's the other thing. Your team stinks. I mean, so your team in the NFL is going to be bad. Your college team is bad. I understand it, like Matt Leinart in the peak of his dynasty, Tim Tebow in the peak of his dynasty. I'm not saying those players were the prospects Caleb is, but I understand those guys returning when their team is stacked. Your team you just got your ass kicked by UCLA. Like, gonna game time decision. Give me a break. The Rodgers 21-day window. What are we doing? What? Maybe he's defying modern medicine by returning on Achilles. Is he? I've always defended Aaron. I've thought a lot of stuff. The immunization was always so stupid. Like, do you understand? No one in the NFL cares. If the NFL players could have chose whether they got the jab or not, and it wasn't mandated to play, 5% of them would have got it. So it's like a lot of the stuff that Aaron became polarizing for, the ayahuasca. That stuff, like the media's like, he's doing drugs. He put drugs in the system. Now, I'm not saying that I would do ayahuasca, more intimidated by it than maybe I'm just not enlightened enough. But like some of the stuff doesn't bother me as much as it did a lot of other people. The 21-day window, the I'm going to return, is one of the most ludicrous things I've ever heard. The team is done. You're done. Can we stop talking about it? Really? I think this story has been, for the first time, I've come around to this guy might be a little addicted to the headlines, and I've always supported him. I always think he's one of the best players I've ever seen. I'm okay with my great players having a little bit of an ego, but this is ridiculous. And then the last thing is, remember Tyreek, he scored that touchdown. He grabbed the phone and he did the backflip. The camera guy who handed him the camera was in on it. I think Tyreek had given him the camera before. Obviously went viral on social media, the video of him doing the backflip. That guy was fired by the NFL because ultimately he was like an independent contractor working for the NFL. Come on. What are we doing? I see J.J. Watt posting these videos about the NFL stealing money. They have a lot of parallels now with our government where they just take. It's like, where's this money go? What are you taking this for? Where's it going? Who's it helping? How does this make any sense? And they're just like, a guy will just make a tackle and be like, it's $50,000 fine. For what? One of the St. Brown brothers got into just a block last week, was fined like $43,000. It's just like, what's happening? Tyreek Hill's, this guy was really fired because he handed him a phone. Like, listen, I'm all for trying to corral some of these big hits across the middle, but like the no fun league, what are we doing? Let's be better than that.